So the next episode is episode 5. This is
one of my favorite episodes.
This one's called Spirit. And there's, of course, reasons for why every one of these episodes are called what they are. So at the beginning of this episode, we have the Pharisees questioning Jesse. Then Atticus meets Jesse outside, as you were just talking about in the last episode, Don, that Atticus is curious. He wants to know more. He's not dismissing it. He knows he saw something interesting.
Right.
Because he had been studying Z and the Zealots in their every move. And so to witness him preparing for this murder to suddenly change, he knew something miraculous had happened. So Atticus questions Jesse, and Jesse tells him that Z believes the healer has to be the Messiah. And that, of course, catches Atticus's attention. And later, he sort of brings this up, I believe, with Quintus to, warn him about the situation. We see Z praying alone and practicing, training still, because he's sort of out in the woods by himself.
Right.
And he's training, probably still wondering what the heck just happened. And he hears this man screaming who is possessed, and it's pretty creepy, to say the least. And the possessed man is trying to convince Z to kill him to end this pain. I mean, it's a dark moment. It sort of brings you back all the way to episode 1 of the series where Mary is possessed, which, of course, Mary becomes a big part of this episode as well. So the man says that it has a bad feeling about you. Mm-hmm. And Z says thank you. He takes it as a compliment.
Well,
it's just
it's
wild.
Incredible. If you think about, though, this group of zealots, they are 100% convinced they are doing the right thing, right? And if you notice in his calisthenics, his routine, later he's running with a T-shirt on, like a tank top, and the other guys tell him, put a shirt on.
That's right.
That's right. But he, in his exercises, there's actually prayer involved as well. He's praying out loud. So he is 100% confident he's doing the right thing. So when he sees someone with a demon, he is not afraid. Unlike the rest of these apostles are going to be, they're going to be terrified because they're not confident in their faith. They're struggling in such a way. But he's not afraid. Now, of course, he's a trained killer. I mean, maybe he's got that going for him. Maybe that's helpful. But he's not worried to approach this man. He's not worried about the demon itself, which we all know some people, like, Father Bob down at St. Philip, right? Some people are not afraid to discuss things. And we also know people who are very faithful who are like, I don't want to talk about that. That's scary. We shouldn't tell that to kids. And Z is not that person, which I think is cool.
Right. So I think he just wanders away at this point, right? The man, the possessed
Z
man does.
steps away from him and says good luck or something.
Yeah, so that they separate for now. From this point, they shift to other storylines, and we see John the Baptist enter the fold. So we get creepy John.
He is a little creepy, by the way.
He is. So Jesus is talking with him, and John and him have this cool interaction where John is just anxious for Jesus to be radical and to be,
let's go, buddy. Let's go.
What are you waiting for? And Jesus is trying to tell him to slow down. But by the end of this conversation, they have this moment where they both soften a little bit, and they're like, it's really becoming real, isn't it?
Yeah.
All this
It's
that we've
all
been building
happening.
up. Jesus says in this moment, I'm always ready to do my Father's will, but that doesn't make it easy. I think John was asking him if he's ready for all this.
Right.
At the end of this episode, John is going off. He wants to tell King Herod that he's doing wrong things, and Jesus has a moment to himself. I think there's other people around, but
I think it's Z who's around, and he realizes, or he doesn't say it out loud, but we realize that Jesus will never see John again.
Yep, that's right.
So there's a little emotional self-reflection of Jesus basically saying goodbye through his Father to John as he walks away.
And he didn't let John see that part of it.
He did not. He did not tell John, "I'll never see you again." He did not tell John, "You're about to die," but he knows.
That's right. So then we pan back to the gang, and Mary, as I said in the last episode, her and Rama and Matthew were wanting to learn more about Scripture. So you have Matthew is, I'm sorry, I'm saying it wrong. Mary is teaching Rama, but Mary is not quite herself. So at the beginning of this episode,
Right.
there's a montage I didn't mention
Yeah.
where she had been praying to herself. She's trying to memorize this scripture or prayer.
And she's picking fruit or something.
Picking fruit, and she
Yeah.
sees this Roman and freaks out and goes and hides.
Right.
And she has this guilty moment where she's like, I'm just praying for all this strength, and I just withered and got weak.
Well, and the prayer is specific to that too.
Yes.
It's like, if
You
I
were
ascend
with
into
me-
heaven,
you
you
are
are
with
with
me,
me.
yeah.
If I
You're with me
make
in
my
the
bed in the
depths of-
depths, you are with me.
Yeah.
So it's like, no matter where you're at, I'm with you. And she's holding on, she's clinging to it as the Romans, but she's
As if
terrified.
she didn't know he was with her.
Yeah, and it's like she just completely forgot what she was.
But isn't that how we all are to some
Oh,
degree?
yeah.
I know there's moments in conversations where I might be observing. Imagine that. I'm observing a conversation and not being the one talking. But I'm observing the
That happens?
conversation. Yeah. I know.
Once.
Only when it requires me getting uncomfortable. So you'll be observing people talking about the faith or talking about whatever the issue is that they're talking about. And maybe you could interject and bring some light to the conversation.
Yeah.
But I crumble and get scared, and I'm afraid to. I'm like, well, what if that person gets mad at me? Or what if what I have to say, what if I don't say it the right way? Because I don't know.
What if I
how to
lead them down a
articulate
falsehood because I don't technically know what I'm saying? I think this is the way it is, but
it. Right.
I don't want to be wrong.
Yeah.
I mute myself in those areas a lot.
Adam, you and I are wrong most of the time. So
Probably.
we should be used to it now.
Majority.
Abby's never
Majority.
wrong.
Yeah,
That's right. So Mary starts to get more uncomfortable in the midst of all this because that demon,
Right.
the possessed man, is getting closer to the camp. So Z finds the group, begins watching them from a tree, and he's just observing things. The possessed man is getting near, and Mary senses it in her head. He shows up. Mary is going to try to be strong in this moment now. And so she confronts him in the similar way that Jesus, in the very first episode of the whole series, was trying to help her. And so just as this demon lunges at her, Z interferes, and he's being attacked. All this training, and he's being choked out by this
Right.
demon. And
The demon and the man knock the dagger out of his hand, and Z's on the ground getting strangled.
what happens? Jesus comes, and with the simplicity of a word, get out of him,
Yeah.
saves him.
And then John the Baptist.
Yeah, this is great.
I did the same thing.
Yep.
I wrote down the minute. I was like, we got.
Oh, that's awesome. Let's give it a
Oh,
pause.
sorry.
So I did that same thing after John the Baptist did it. I'm on my laptop with headphones and watching this, and I did it out loud. I was like, yeah! And my wife and kids looked at me like, I was like, sorry guys, I'm just into this. Like, people have to look at me when I'm watching this show as a weirdo in the same way that they look at John the Baptist.
Yeah.
It can look like that when you're on fire for your faith sometimes, and I don't know how to communicate that. But John the Baptist doesn't care how he communicates it. He just is authentic.
Right.
That's what I love about creepy John.
He knows his mission.
Yes.
He's living it.
So I even put John the Baptist chants, yeah. And so the man is healed. Mary is embarrassed at this moment again, and she hangs around but then flees the group. Z asked Jesus, this is when Z and Jesus had this moment, but what was I didn't write it down, but what was the interaction between Jesus and the guy who was healed? He calls him by name
He calls
again?
him his name, Caleb. What is
Yeah.
your name? Caleb. And that's weird, but Mary asked the same thing. She wanted to know his name, and he didn't answer her because the demons were more powerful than
Yeah.
him. Right? But she knew what to do.
She knew what to do.
She knew what to do.
And she was brave enough to do it.
She was brave enough to do it. It was weird, but Matthew stepped in front of her at the beginning with a spoon. He was going to protect her with
The
a
spoon.
spoon. Thomas had a knife, but Matthew was like, get away from here, kind of thing.
I forgot
with a
about
spoon.
that interaction
Yeah.
between Thomas and Matthew. They sort of have a moment where they're acting similar.
Right.
Thomas doesn't see it,
Thomas doesn't
though.
like it. I don't want to be like you. Wait,
Yeah.
stop being like me.
Yeah, that was cool.
So he says something like, out of him, and then when Caleb says his name, he says, welcome back. I know it seemed like it would never end, Caleb, but it's over now. And then they hug.
Yep, that's awesome. And then I think Jesus asks Z to take a walk, and that's when they have their conversation. And that's when that moment that you referenced, I can't remember if it was in the last episode, but Z asks Jesus why he healed his brother, and
He
tells
says,
him,
I healed him to get to you, Simon. And he said, why do you want me? And he said, he said, why do you need me?
Yeah.
And he said, Simon, I don't need you. I don't need anything. I wanted you.
yeah,
That will have to be enough for now.
That will have to be enough for now.
mm-hmm. And that's when he threw his dagger in the
I
water.
know, that kills me.
Throws his
He's like, let me see
Sicka-
that
Sicka
weapon.
dagger.
Wow, this is nice. Chucks it in the water.
Which is so weird because I remember seeing that the first time. I was like, that was the worst chuck ever.
I know.
It
Right?
was
Because
barely in
it
the
literally
water.
goes a foot and a half into the water. But then you realize why it had to do that way.
Because
So
who's
shortly.
watching?
Atticus.
Atticus.
But in my mind, I don't know if I've ever thought, but I literally said out loud the first time I saw that episode, I was like, that was horrible. What kind of throw is that? I've never
The Messiah
put
could have
the
got it.
Christ
Yeah.
down in such a way before.
That's awesome. And that's how the episode ends. Atticus observes and he gets the dagger from the water. I think that's how it ends. Or maybe no, because Mary flees and then
They have to go find her, yeah.
Simon and Matthew come and tell Jesus. And this is once again Jesus tells Simon, Peter, and Matthew to go find her. And he puts those two in charge of this mission.
Even though Simon is standing right there, even though the zealot is right there,
That's right.
of all the people, he knows exactly who's going to find and who is going to help. Not only does he know who's going to help Mary, but he knows who this mission is going to help.
That's
And
right.
it's Simon and
And,
Matthew.
and Jesus has to remind, because Simon's like, I'm not going with Matthew.
Yeah.
And Jesus has to remind, doesn't matter who you're going with. It's what you're trying to do. You're
Right.
trying to find Mary.
When the other apostles try to convince Simon of the right thing to do, Simon pushes back on it. But as soon as Jesus corrects him, he'll
Yeah.
submit and do
Yeah.
it. It's a cool thing. It's the only time you really see, at least at this point, Simon's humility is when he's with two people. One is Jesus, and the other is when he's with Eden.
Eden. Yeah.
So we had a long break without Eden, which I didn't
I
like because she's such a
know.
powerful
She's good.
figure.
But
Now, we
but
don't-
it has to be,
That's true.
know.
right? It's almost like, I don't know. They gave us so much Eden up front, and maybe they were afraid. We're making all this stuff. We don't know anything about this woman.
That's very true.
So we have to
Other
start
than that,
pushing.
she has a mother-in-law.
Right.
Or a mother that's sick.
A mother, yeah. So we have to start doing less of her because otherwise people are going to be thinking she's
Yeah. She
we know
obviously-
all this stuff for real, but it's all made up.
She's gonna have.
But before Matthew and Simon leave, Jesus reminds Matthew, what's the verse? What's the verse that Philip gave you? The Bible verse. And
Oh,
that
that's
Bible verse
right.
is important for Matthew to help him find Mary, which is perfect.
Yeah, it's the same one that Mary was memorizing. at the
Yeah,
beginning.
same one. He got it from Philip and
Right.
gave it to the women.
Awesome. So that takes us to episode 6. Did you guys have anything else on episode 5 before we go?
So I looked up the Sicka dagger. I was like, what they kept saying the name Sicka, right? This small dagger that he has. And the only thing I thought was interesting is the history of the Zealots. They had been around a long time, but this small dagger originally they had to be made by the individual Zealots who would use it. It doesn't really say that Simon made his, and it said that only lasted for the first couple of generations. But they were first Roman war in 72 and 73, first Jewish Roman war was between the Zealots and the Romans. So, 30 years later, there's going to be an all-out war between the Zealots and the Romans. And there was a mass suicide of the Zealots on a mountain, which is known as the mountain where David hid from Saul. The zealots would go to that mountain because they thought David hid here and was safe, and they would go and hide there. 700 people committed suicide.
Holy cow.
Oh, my Lord.
And the only way to get up to this top of this little plateau mountain was to walk on a trail that went around the side of it to get up to where they were hiding, and it was only wide enough for one man. They could not walk to a side, and it was called the Snake, the path to get up there. So they hid up there thinking they were going to be saved like David, and when the Romans surrounded them and were coming up, they decided to commit suicide. 700 people, including women and children.
That's wild.
Yeah. A little creepy.
Well, that makes me think of, too, I meant to say this at the beginning, like when that Caleb, who's possessed, when he comes up to Z, and he says, "It makes me cut myself." And he shows him the cuts on his arms.
Forgot about that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just thought about, like, mental health is so prevalent nowadays, and, like, just the self-harm of it. Like, that's not from God. Like, that is straight from the devil. And, like, that is exactly what I saw in that scene. I was like, wow. When he said, "It makes me cut myself."
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
That's powerful. I don't even know how to respond to
Yeah.
It's also, I thought it was interesting, too, that this was one demon in this man, Caleb,
Yeah.
and Mary had 7 in her. That's mind-blowing.
Doesn't the devil even say that to Mary?
Yeah.
I think he even
Yeah.
calls, says that.
It just,
In some
The
way.
one that was in Caleb says
Yeah.
that to her. Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
To try to get her to
try to
back
get her.
down. That's wild. The 7 told me about you or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. And
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
When he gets up and is approaching, I've heard about you.
Yeah.
The 7 spoke of you.
Yeah.
It's almost like she was a prize to be won from both sides, God and the devil.
And one of the other things that the demons always speak about is they smell of something grotesque. Anybody that's encountered Jesus
Right.
stinks, according to the demons.
Right.
It's just,
But thank you. Z, but thank you.
exactly.
Thank you.
Z had the best approach to
Yeah.
it. He didn't give him any power until he realized that he wasn't as
Till
strong.
he lost his dagger.
Yeah,
And he thought he had lost it. Yeah.
that's right. All right. So now we'll move on to episode 6. Good ending. I'm glad we added that stuff. Thank you for listening to this episode of the BBHS Seek and Find podcast. If you like what you heard, please like and share with a friend. Be sure to subscribe to all of our social media. You can follow us on Instagram and YouTube at BBHS.SeekandFind. You can also follow us on Facebook at Bishop Russer High School Seek and Find Ministry. Once again, thanks for listening, and may God bless you today.